a web any size. Can't you see? Just like flies, look out. Here comes the Spider-Man. Is he strong? Listen, bud. He's got radioactive blood.
You know, out of all the Marvel characters out there, the most famous one of them all has to be your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I mean, sure, we all know about his numerous comics, the Sam Raimi trilogy, and his involvement with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But even though this is not necessarily talked about as much, Spidey has always been a TV kind of guy. With over a dozen series starring the web-slinger, most of which are animated by the way, Spider-Man has made himself a very prominent figure on television as much as he did in the comics since he was relatively fresh off the pages. From the 1967 animated series that now graced us with such glorious memes, to the more modern shows with the critically mixed Ultimate Spider-Man. If we move back just a little bit in 2008, two guys by the name of Greg Weisman and Victor Cook teamed up in order to create a special little series for the superhero called The Spectacular Spider-Man, which was made to mix many elements from both the classic comics to the new ones from the Ultimate Spider-Man lineup in order to tell its own interpretation of the life of Peter Parker as he tries to balance his life as a high school student with the life of fighting crime from crazy villains. Now, what makes this particular series stand out from all the other Spider-Man shows is actually that both critics and audiences deemed it as not one of, but the absolute best Spider-Man series. So much so that even both IGN and TV Guide would place it among their list of the greatest animated series of all time. Pretty crazy when you think about it. People legit calling this one of the best animated series ever made. Not just the ones that feature Spider-Man, or even among one of the greatest among the Marvel series. No. People are legit calling this one of the best animated series, period. I don't even think the movies got that much praise. Holy crap. However, it does make you wonder, how is it that such a little series with very few amount of episodes would actually go out and get this huge impact? And on top of that, how is it that amongst all the series that feature one of the most iconic superheroes ever made, this is the one that people call the greatest? Well, funny story actually. I did mention that this show actually mixes aspects of both old and new Spider-Man, right? Every element that you'll find in here is taken from a previous source of Spider-Man. This could range from the main characters and all the villains that come in to terrorize New York, to even the smallest details like Kenny Kong having a moment to shine in the show. What does make it unique from all the other Spider-Man projects though, is how the story would flow. Like I said before, the whole point of the series is the entire balance in Peter Parker's life. One part consists of him as the geeky high school student who has to take care of his Aunt May and take pictures for the Daily Bugle, and the other part is to be the crime-fighting Spider-Man who has to clear the street from any villain no matter how big, small, crazy, or dangerous they can be. The result is probably what you'd expect to realistically be. Not easy at all. Even Parker himself had a bit of a hard time to keep his superhero and personal life in order without intervening the other. This is where part of the beauty of the series comes in. It knows that what makes Spider-Man both unique and more memorable than most other superheroes is the character development of Peter Parker himself. After all, he's just a teenager, plus the fact that he has tons of more responsibilities than kids of his age. Not just with his grades and friends at school, but also being the only one to take care of Aunt May, his job as a photographer in the Bugle, and of course, being Spider-Man. We all know about Uncle Ben's old saying, but this is one of the rare moments that truly captures it as one of the themes of the story. It's not just a phrase that the franchise loves to repeat over and over, it's a philosophy that is represented by Spider-Man.
I admire anyone who dresses up as their favorite animal. Better still, you can fly. So I gotta ask, you heard the one about great power coming with great responsibility?
But of course, this isn't all about Spider-Man. You can't have your superhero without some villains causing chaos. The one element that this series makes sure to get fully right is how they became the supervillains we all know them today. It does a very good job to take time to know these characters before their transformation. So much so that we would see them on several episodes before they turn bad. One great example is with Eddie Brock. Throughout Season 1, we see him as Peter's longtime friend hanging out at his job at the lab. However, as the show progresses, his trust to Parker slowly diminishes to the point of hate and jealousy. And after Spidey decided to take away the symbiote prior to using it in a few episodes, the Black Goo and Eddie are ready to form together in the season finale to become Venom.
When we're done, the whole world will hate you almost as much as we do.
Well, at least now we know who's responsible for the Amazing Spider-Man movies. But going back to the villains, the series crafts each one to give them a clear motive to how they became bad and what they want from Spider-Man. Some could be just a bunch of thugs tired of being foiled by Spidey, who got a massive upgrade like Sandman and Rhino, while others are just unfortunate souls who got some bad luck at the wrong time, like Electro and Molten Man. Admittedly, some villains don't seem as original as others. Like, this version of Green Goblin and Black Cat made it pretty obvious that they're just trying to copy the Joker and Catwoman from Batman. Then again, that's more of an issue with the characters themselves than the series. While the villains would get their own episode to be featured fighting Spider-Man and even working together as the Sinister Six a few times, there are moments when they would present a head honcho who is leading the crimes in New York playing as the main antagonist. They could range from Tombstone as the big man to Dr. Octopus as the master planner.
Hey, Master Planner, some secret identity advice from an expert. Don't sign your work.
But keep in mind though, these are just the people that are in Parker's superhero life. Yeah, sure, maybe his normal life doesn't seem as action-packed as when he would put on the suit. But it doesn't change the fact that the characters are still as fascinating to watch regardless. More than other Spider-Man series, including the movies, the characters in Parker's normal life each go through several different developments. They might start out as your standard tropes in a high school setting, but would later gain a complex characteristic to make things interesting for the story, sometimes down to the point of having them involved with Spider-Man. A few examples include Harry Osborn, who starts out as one of Peter's geeky friends, but would go through dark lengths in order to become more popular in school, get the girl of his dreams, and having the approval of his dad. Another good one is Flash Thompson, who starts out as the jock-type school bully, but with one step at a time, his attitude would eventually mature to become an honest man. Even J. Jonah Jameson himself has more of a complexity when his son John enters the scene. But of course, not even Spidey himself could get away without some romance. And wouldn't you know it, unlike the movies where the love interests are more separated, this one prominently features both Mary Jane Watson and Gwen Stacy. Gwen is the main love interest that the series slowly presents that she is Peter's love in his life, but several obstacles have to be passed before the two would ever get together. Mary Jane, on the other hand, is portrayed more as the free spirit that doesn't necessarily need anyone, but her goal is to make sure that both Peter and Gwen's life are well in order so that they could both be ultimately happy. So far, for the most part, the series is actually doing a pretty good job at taking the core elements of the comics that do work and integrating that into itself. It's pretty good. However, like in Peter's life, not everything would go as well as planned. Even the show itself would get some reminders that not everything is going its way.
My least favorite part of the plan.
If there has to be something to criticize in this, it would have to be in the animation. Visually, Spectacular is known to have the most simplistic look amongst all the Spider-Man series, especially with the design of the characters. They look like people from Kim Possible, but can only be drawn with straight lines and have their pupils completely dominate their eyes. This may not be as effective during the superhero moments. In fact, the action scenes are very well executed, and the stylized look work well on many of the villains. But when we see Parker in his regular life, that's when the problems show and make the series look a little more cheap. Not 67 Spider-Man cheap, but you could tell that some shows at the time put more effort in the animation than this. Also, technically, this wouldn't be categorized as a problem per se, But it's easy to tell how things aren't as great as they used to once Season 2 starts. Now that we're introduced to most of the villains and other characters, it offers little to keep the surprises rolling and maintain our intrigue. It doesn't help either that the newer villains introduced here, like Mysterio and Kraven the Hunter, are rather underwhelming compared to the rest, and the season didn't fully establish a bigger and threatening boss in charge of all the crimes in the levels of Tombstone. It wouldn't be until the last 4 episodes that really brought it back to the glory of how it was back in Season 1. On top of that, even the aspect of Peter's personal life got a downgrade, from looking into all of his responsibilities and how he tries to work them all out, to dealing with a love triangle with Gwen Stacy and Liz Allen.
He's just a little confused. Hi, Petey.
Hey, Liz.
Okay, a lot confused.
Well, you can't necessarily expect to hit all its shots perfectly. I mean, even Spidey himself has to take a few punches if he wants to succeed. However, with all the web-slinging action in the series, it actually ended up being pretty solid regardless. Sounds crazy, but I'd even take this over the movies. The Spectacular Spider-Man is not only one of, if not the best Spider-Man TV series, but it's also one of the best things to come out of the franchise outside of the comics. Thanks to its phenomenal writing, it offers a great story and a large cast of complex characters and villains, awesome action with every episode, and a fantastic version of Peter Parker that mixes his good-hearted geekiness with the snarky funny man that's packed with more responsibilities than he could probably handle. Not everything came out perfectly here, since it's not visually the best Spider-Man series, and not every episode will be as spectacular as the title, but those issues can be forgotten by how the series stays purely true to the spirit of the comics that made him the Marvel icon we know him today, on top of throwing references from other projects like the Sam Raimi trilogy. For any fan of Spider-Man, Marvel, or just anything related to comics, this would be a must-watch. In fact, even if you're not interested in comics, the series is still worth watching since it stands very well on its own. Also, I just gotta mention about the 12th episode in the first season titled Intervention, which honestly, I feel like it's the best episode of the series. This is where Peter has to come face to face with the symbiote and reflect back on his past, including the death of Uncle Ben. It doesn't just become a battle of Spider-Man versus the symbiote, but more the life form versus Peter and Uncle Ben, played by Ed Asner, looking deep into Parker's responsibilities and his past for why he can't give up to hate, and that it's much more than just the spider that truly formed Spider-Man. I may not give it the rating that sounds like the massive praise it usually gets, but still, an 8 out of 10 is pretty solid.
And that's what they call bringing down the house.
Admittedly, even though I'm not necessarily big on the whole comic book genre as most people are, I have to say that this is the most fun I've had with Spider-Man. Legit. However, like I said before, even though this series was highly praised, it is still a relatively short series with only a total of 26 episodes. That's it. Some of you might be wondering, is it that short because it's kind of expected to be that way? Like, it was entirely planned in the same way that Alex Hirsch planned Gravity Falls to be this short series? Well, in reality, the answer is a lot more complex than you think. You see, the original plan was to have a total of 65 episodes, and both Cook and Wiseman had ideas of where to bring the series. In fact, in the 3rd season, some of the villains that would have been introduced include Carnage, Hobgoblin, Hydro Man, and Scorpion. However, considering that the show was canned at the end of 2010, many speculations claim that it had to do with Marvel being completely purchased by Disney. However, that is not the case. The real reason for the show's death is because of another company. One that is absolutely clueless regarding the business and could even be considered a joke in the film industry. Of course it is. You see, before Disney came in, Sony had all the film rights to Spider-Man. Not just the movies, but the television stuff as well. Just a few months before the buyout, they gave all of Spidey's TV rights back to Marvel. That is, except for the Spectacular Spider-Man. So because Sony had the rights to the show and Marvel had the rights to use Spider-Man on TV, It became a case of everyone loses and neither companies had all the rights to continue the show. And when Marvel made the announcement of Ultimate Spider-Man, it was the series' final nail to the coffin. Why would Sony Pictures do a move that would kill off the show like that? I don't know. I can't even remember the last time the company ever made a smart decision. But does that mean the spirit of Spectacular ended off with it? Far from that, actually. Honestly, it's really hard to think about the position that she set me in without any sort of stress coming into my head. I mean, I have to do something to save Spider-Man. Do you realize how crazy that sounds? I mean, this must be what Peter Parker feels on a regular basis with a huge responsibility looming over him. But if this would require me to go and beat up a corporation that's run purely on stupid and desperate decisions like Sony Pictures in order for us to go and gain more good quality content, then I'm all in for it. See you later, dudes! Crap! I just made a hole in the wall. Great. What's it that I'm so stupid and trigger happy?
Spider-Man. Spider-Man. It's catchy.